next 24 hours. So that could be this evening, tonight, or early Saturday morning as it sits in place in the Federated States of Micronesia. That was about 680 miles south-southeast of Guam and about 770 miles south-southeast of Saipan and about 265 miles southwest of Chuk Lagoon. The last several hours have been interesting because we've been seeing a little bit of a southeastward shift the last several hours, possibly go into a counterclockwise loop. This may have implications for the islands of Chuk State, particularly Chuk Lagoon, keeping the axis of heavy weather, showers, and locally torrential rainfall for areas of the Chuk Lagoon. That would have impacts regarding flash flooding and the potential for mudslides. Sustained winds are right about 18 to 22 knots, and that's been holding steady as this disturbance is getting its act together. And so what are we looking for moving forward? This is our concern. This is the possible area of passage through the islands in the coming days. So the weather forecast for Guam and the CNMI is actually very good for Saturday and Sunday with ongoing dry season conditions. However, that could change Monday, and we'll get to Patrick, our senior forecaster, on shift. He will talk about what we expect through the weekend and early next week. But right now, 97W, that's been sitting nearly stationary with a little bit of a drift toward the southeast and southwestern Chuk State. Eventually, this will start gaining latitude and become a threat for Guam and the CNMI. That's where we've boosted up our communications, our collaboration with the Homeland Security offices in Guam and the CNMI, because this is something we have to look at closely. Brandon, our science officer, he will be up here next to talk about why there's such a concern for this system and what it means for us in the Guam and the CNMI. And then we'll pass it over to Patrick to talk about the forecast for the next several days. Brandon.
Yes, so that is one of the concerns that we've been watching for the past week, actually, with some of the models showing in the long term a potential tropical cyclone passing near or through the Marianas. And so right now, there is some considerable spread where somewhere within this area, computer models are giving a pretty good signal for this disturbance to eventually develop, intensify, and then lift toward the Marianas. So right now, I know we've been getting a lot of conversations and some phone calls from people looking at different apps, at some of the model data. And right now, the various models, we've got the range of a storm passage to the west of the Marianas, to the east of the Marianas, or straight over us. And so that is the concern as we head into the next several days. And so we want to keep that in mind, that right now we're still talking about the potentials. There's not much reason to give much certainty except for the impacts within Micronesia. And so speaking about Micronesia, what are those impacts? We do have a special weather statement currently in effect for Yap and Chuk. And so right now we're seeing all those heavy showers, gusty wind conditions, and the seas are occasionally spiking. So Landon had mentioned a surge of westerly winds just south of 5 north the past couple of days. And so that did result in some 10-foot seas west of Kapinga Marangi. So as these westerly winds surge across Micronesia, expect to see those sea conditions spiking. Gusty winds, locally heavy rainfall, and thunderstorms quite possible in the next couple of days as the system sits within Micronesia and then gradually lifts northward. Additionally, there is that increased risk for mudslides and also for the higher terrain islands across Chuk and mainly in Chuk Atoll, Chuk Lagoon. But there is that potential over the next several days, potential for tropical depression or tropical storm conditions late in the weekend. And also there's sea conditions. We're looking at the possibility of small craft advisory conditions, so seas reaching or exceeding 10-foot heights, and also there's winds exceeding 22 knots. Before I hand it over to Patrick Dahl, I do want to open it up. If anybody watching has any questions for us, feel free to text below, and we'll be watching the Facebook feed and be glad to get those answers to you as soon as possible.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As it's been well stated, there is still a lot of model uncertainty And really that's going to continue until this thing really starts to form. Each run, these are 4 different computer models shown to Marianas as the system comes through. And each run, they bounce around from anywhere from southern Guam waters to near Tinian and Saipan. And until this system really starts to get wrapped up and developed, each run is going to be a little bit variant. So there is high uncertainty. Everyone definitely should continue to monitor every forecast and be prepared. Now,
We have a couple questions actually coming through. So as people are texting questions, and please, if you have any questions, just write those into the chat right now. Is there a possibility of this becoming a typhoon?
there is that possibility of a weak typhoon. What we do know is this system will likely rapidly strengthen. It's currently, here's Chuk, southwest of Chuk, southeast of Sadawal, south of Palawat. And as you can see, we're starting to get colder cloud tops. This is called an infrared satellite image. And similar to up here, the brighter the colors, the colder the cloud tops, which means it should be taller. The clouds should be taller and heavier rainfall. And what we look for is for this convection to start to wrap around. Once that occurs, the models will start to get a little bit more consolidated of a track as it comes through. And kind of giving you an idea, here's, this would be late Tuesday night, or late Monday night, Tuesday morning. And as you can see, there's still a wide range from north of Saipan to near Rota to some runs south of Guam. So what we do know is we are going to have a fairly significant system coming through. Will it be a storm? Will it be a typhoon? Weak typhoon? Those questions still need to be answered. One thing confidence is growing on, though, is the potential for heavy rainfall. And just using a broad brush blend, this is the rainfall totals. The screen area is around 10 inches. This is over a few days, mainly Monday through Wednesday, and then 6-7 inches up near Tinian and Saipan. But again, depending on the model run, this has been bouncing back and forth every run for a few days. We're going to look at mainly 5 to 9 inches locally higher.
Now, there's a question coming through regarding Typhoon Sudalor that impacted Saipan back in 2015. Is there any indication or possibility that this could be a powerful typhoon that sneaks up on us and catches us by surprise?
The conditions are favorable for rapid development. We have low wind shear and very warm waters. I would not give it a zero possibility, but at this time, from what we're seeing in all the model data, this looks like anywhere potentially some a moderate strength tropical storm to maybe a weak typhoon. But where it goes, when does it achieve those levels? And that's the key. Does it achieve it as it's approaching to be answered? It's just we have to wait for the system to develop to get a better idea.
Okay, regarding the model 4 plot that you had, can you bring that up again?
Sure.
When we're looking at model forecasts, does that necessarily represent what we're going to be seeing on Tuesday night? Can that change?
That has been changing every model run. The track or the wind bars, the strength, they're important, but I wouldn't get too locked in on that. What we're looking at is what is the general trend from run to run, because until the models really converge after this gets developed, we're trying to limit the forecast cone of uncertainty. Like, you know, is it that wide or this wide of a track potential? And that's really the key, is when this thing develops, it could develop quickly. So make sure you stay informed. Make sure you have the supplies you need. A lot can change, and it could change very quickly within 12 to 24 hours. And that's what we're continuing to monitor.
right, very good. And again, if y'all have any questions, please continue to type in your questions. We're going to be handing this back over to Brandon, who will discuss some of the uncertainties. And keep in mind that little wiggles matter. Every 6 hours, we have a new forecast come out from the models, the variety of models from around the globe. So forecasts are always analyzing the latest, most up-to-date weather information, crunches out a new forecast. So things can and do change, and it's very early in the game as it's still Friday afternoon, and we have a lot of room for things to happen. So let's go over to Brandon to talk about some of the uncertainties as we go back over to the TV screen.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the questions coming up, and I know, let's see, Glenn Pollock here asked about pseudolure. And so pseudolure back in 2015 was a very small system, and it was an unfortunate system that we did not get a lot of the low Earth orbit satellites passing over the system just as it was approaching the CNMI. And so that system was a very tightly clustered, strong typhoon as it passed over Saipan. In this case, we're watching this one very closely. The model guidance is really has been quite consistent, showing a lot of details with this developing disturbance. And so we're on top of it. We're having a lot of communication. And so we're going to be watching it very closely this weekend.
Another quick question, right quick, Brandon.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a question regarding typhoon shutters. Do we put up typhoon shutters today or tomorrow?
Don't worry about it now. Right now is the time just to keep an eye on the weather forecast. You can follow our forecast. We're updating those every 12 hours. You can find those online at weather.gov/GUM. And so typically when we issue a tropical cyclone watch, that is indicating the potential for damaging winds, tropical storm conditions within 48 hours. So right now we are well ahead of that. But we really wanted to get a forward lean on this system, given the model guidance that has been for days now showing this type of a scenario unfolding across the region. But really, we've got a holiday weekend, or we've got a weekend coming up, and so we want to get everybody, the decision makers, on the same page before we head into the weekend. But just to reprise some of what Patrick Dahl was saying about the Marianas. Those impacts anticipated in the Monday through Wednesday time frame, so still several days away. Potential for tropical storm typhoon impacts in that time frame. So we're just speaking to the potentials. There's nothing certain yet. There's increasing certainty, but we're still in the potential realm. So everything is on the table right now to be considered. Keep your eyes open. Sea conditions, we could see that potential for hazardous seas reaching or even exceeding 15 feet early next week. And then even after the passage, next week we could see that southwesterly swell building up across the area. But I just wanted to recap all the uncertainty that still lies within this system. We've been tracking the center of the circulation. It is shifting a little bit southeastward. This is typical for these formative circulations. And so we're looking at 100, 200 mile deviation in the short-term location of the circulation. And so 4 days out is too early to talk about, could we see a passage over Guam? Could we see a passage over Saipan? It's too much uncertainty. We should be looking at this as a potential for all of the Marianas to see impacts. And ultimately, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center said it best in their bulletin this morning with the Tropical Cyclone Formation Alert. There is a good potential for a rapidly developing system in the next 12 to 36 hours. And the big questions, when does our certainty increase? Two things. Once the circulation becomes well-defined and not elongated east to west as it currently is, but when it is truly becoming a circular convective system that all the showers and thunderstorms are developing within the center. And then also once we've seen that northerly motion starting to take place and that system is gaining latitude.
Now I see a lot of conversation in the chat going on right now regarding categories and wind speeds and typhoon versus hurricane and depressions and storms. We'll be posting up some information on our social media. I frequently asked questions regarding typhoons to the area. This is our first possible significant weather threat regarding tropical cyclones in over 3 years. La Nina has kept things pretty quiet across the region, and so we've been very fortunate about that. But this is going to be our first threat in quite a while. So we're going to be posting some information about what are the watches and warnings, what do they mean, when are they issued, and what it means to the conditions of readiness here for Guam and the CNMI. But a lot of the frequently asked questions, what are the wind speeds of depressions? What are the wind speeds of tropical storms? Follow our Facebook page. We'll be posting that information up, as well as all this about watches and warnings. Currently, we have a special weather statement issued. That's for Yap and Chuk. We may issue a special weather statement this weekend for Guam and the CNMI as things become nearer in time. There are no watches and warnings for any islands of the region. If we go to a tropical depression overnight, that may require some watches and warnings for tropical storm conditions for islands of Chuk State and maybe far eastern Yap State. But for Guam and CNMI, no watches and warnings in effect at this time. Tropical storm watches and typhoon watches are issued when 34 knot winds or 39 mile per hour sustained winds are possible within 48 hours. So when we're looking at the possibility of tropical storm force conditions within 2 days, we'll raise a watch. We upgrade that watch to a tropical storm or typhoon warning when those damaging winds of 39 miles per hour or 34 knots are expected. So this is the key words, possible versus expected within 48 hours or 24 hours. So this is some of the key terminology to understand if and when we have a tropical cyclone threaten the region. And I think that's the last slide we have over here. So we're going to wrap this up. Continue to send your questions, message us on Facebook, but also watch the latest weather forecast information at weather.gov/GUM. We will be working 24/7 around the clock through the weekend to provide the latest information. So stay tuned. Time is on our side, but be ready for what may happen next week.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the question was, what is the next name? And I believe that's going to be Mawar, M-A-W-A-R. That's contributed to the Typhoon Committee. That comes from Malaysia, and it means rose. So if and when this system becomes a tropical cyclone, that would be our second tropical cyclone of 2023. And it will be eventually named Mawar from Malaysia. And so keep that in mind. Can we have typhoons in May? Absolutely, yes. Think back to 1976. We had Typhoon Pamela, and then just 8 years ago, we had Typhoon Dolphin pass through Guam and the Rota Channel on May 15th. So we just passed the 8-year anniversary for Typhoon Dolphin. And so with that, stay tuned for the latest. Message us if you have any questions or concerns. We'll be watching this around the clock through the weekend.